Okay, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the first Focus Cities webinar of 2019. My name is Jamie Fear, and I'm your moderator today. I'm the Deputy Director of California Walks, and we are the statewide voice for pedestrian safety and healthy walkable communities for people of all ages and abilities. We provide technical assistance to communities to create more walkable communities, and we also work at the state level to advance opportunities for active transportation. We're partners with UC Berkeley SafeTREC for our Focus Cities efforts. For those not familiar, SafeTREC stands for Safe Transportation Research and Education Center. They are a University of California, Berkeley research center affiliated with the Institute of Transportation Studies and the School of Public Health. Their mission is to reduce transportation-related injuries and fatalities through research, education, outreach, and community service. SafeTREC conducts research, provides technical assistance and workshops to communities across California, educates the transportation safety professionals of tomorrow, and coordinates major transportation safety programs for the state of California. We'd also like to take a moment to acknowledge the support of the California Office of Traffic Safety, who provided a grant through the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration for this program. We appreciate their dedicated support of community pedestrian and bicycle safety. Before we dive in, a couple of housekeeping reminders. Please be sure to mute your audio. We are recording both the webinar audio and chat features, and we will make that recording available afterwards. If you do not want to be recorded, please refrain from talking or using the chat feature. If you have questions throughout the webinar, please type them in the chat box on your screen, and we will answer as many of them as we can at the end of this presentation. With that, I'm excited to introduce today's presenters. Dr. Destiny Thomas is a Transportation Planning Associate 2 with the Los Angeles Department of Transportation, or LADOT, a cultural anthropologist with a community organizing background. Dr. Thomas is responsible for working with the Vision Zero Policy and Programs Division to deliver projects that improve safety and healthy outcomes on and around the high injury network. Lyfe is the director of Lyfe Productives and a nationally known and renowned business leader, justice advocate, and artist. Invited by both student groups and department chairs, he presents as a guest lecturer and resident at dozens of universities annually. Ahmed is a believer in the ability of communities to transform their surroundings for the better. He has spent his career connecting underserved communities to resources in local government, the nonprofit space, and the tech sector. He studied political science at UC Santa Barbara and completed a master's program in public policy from UCLA. Since then, Ahmed has worked as a public sector consultant for an Oakland-based research group and led equitable community engagement for the Oakland Department of Transportation, or OakDOT. Lily Brown is a transportation planner in the Oakland Department of Transportation Planning and Project Development section. Lily works to create safe streets and enjoyable public space for all users and modes with a focus on underserved Oaklanders. Lily believes equitable community engagement is the foundation for transformative transportation improvements. Lily is the project manager of Let's Bike Oakland, Oakland's citywide bike plan update, and Paint the Town, a pilot program allowing community members to paint temporary street murals on Oakland's roads. Lily also serves as co-chair of OakDOT's racial equity team, whose mission is to address racial disparity both in Oakland and in the city workplace. As an East Bay native, she is passionate about serving the community that raised her. Lily holds a Master's of Urban and Regional Planning degree from the University of California, Los Angeles. Phoenix Mangrum has been a lifelong bicycling enthusiast. He began riding at age 4 and continues in his lifelong pursuit at age 77. For the past 10 years, he has been working directly with bikes and has been a bike educator for kids and adults at Cycles of Change for the last 7 years. Phoenix is a strong believer in the power of bikes to change lives for the better. He sees the many benefits bicycles provide: exercise, health, academically rich applied learning, and physics and engineering among them, and as a life-changing opportunity for riders of all ages. And he's eager to continue spreading bicycle know-how to more and more new audiences. Without further ado, Dr. Thomas and Ice, please take it away.
Good morning, everyone. This is Dr. Thomas at LADOT. I want to confirm that you can see my slides. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our partnership with Lyfe Productive.
Destiny, we
yes.
Sorry, Destiny, we cannot see your slides yet.
Okay, great. Let me. There we go.
Not yet. Oh, there they are. Great.
We're good to go?
Yes.
Awesome. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how we develop the version of engagement that we do in LA. And then I think I'm going to hand it over to Ice to go into detail about what it's been like for his group to partner with us in a formal capacity. We identify Lyfe Productive as a core partner in most of our engagement activities at the department, because really what's as important as the infrastructure design and engineering practices is the spirit of the work and the ways that we want to engage communities. And what we found is that there's a real need for capacity building at the community level, because we haven't historically offered these types of formal partnerships to community partners. And Lyfe Productive, because of their background in working with government agencies, combined with their knack for social justice and public health concerns, really made for an ideal partner as we walk together through this journey of introducing a new way of planning and engagement through our planning efforts at the department. And what we call this approach is a dignity-infused community engagement model. There are so many aspects and compartments that fit into this framework. We're only going to go over a couple today, but we will definitely send out more detailed information about what the approach looks like after the webinar. I am an anthropologist. I'm a trained anthropologist, social, cultural, and actually scientific anthropologist. And I always lift that up because in my earliest days with LADOT, it was really apparent to me that we were missing a human element and real nuanced analysis of why people move the way they do through the streetscape. So that informs much of the strategy as well as the values and our non-negotiable pillars that we lift up through our dignity-infused community engagement model. One of the things that really underpins our work in Los Angeles is the narrative that surrounds Vision Zero. Vision Zero is our mayor's initiative to getting to zero traffic-related fatalities and serious injuries in the city by the year 2025. It's a really ambitious goal, and it's become a very highly politicized issue. And so one thing that came up for me early and continues to enter our sphere of work is the difference between who's talking about Vision Zero and who we are talking about when we speak to Vision Zero. And so you'll see here that on the left-hand side of the screen, there is a map of our, what we call our high injury network. And this is pretty much where our traffic safety and collision data shows us the corridors in LA that experience the highest numbers of traffic-related deaths and serious injuries. One of the glaringly obvious things that come about through this map, that show up in this map, are that the majority of our unsafe streets and infrastructure challenges are in South Los Angeles. However, when you look at the right side of the screen, you see that much of our conversation, especially in the advocacy realm, is happening in West LA, and it centers the West LA community. And so we have this contention where there's a real need that in South Central LA to make improvements and to make them quickly, but because of the politicization that's happened with people who have more political capital, time, and resources in other areas of LA, we've really experienced a stall and a bottleneck in getting projects in the ground. So naturally, we haven't seen the type of progress in reducing fatalities that we would like to, because we've literally been wrapped up in political dynamics to try to get projects in the ground. Our earliest version of this work really honed in on this narrative around, you know, if you just make the decision to slow down a little bit, you could save a life. And what we've found through our work in South LA is that while speed is definitely a top factor, there are also historic and longstanding problems in the ways we've done planning, and infrastructure priorities in South Central LA. For example, there are some corridors in LA that haven't been reconstructed or repaired in over 40 years. So this notion that all you have to do is slow down, or that all you have to do is observe the traffic laws will save a life is not necessarily true. And so we leverage our partnerships with CBOs and with firms like Lyfe to really tease out the nuances and to provide a more appropriate cultural context to the work that we're doing. And so we're working currently to shift that narrative. Most Vision Zero cities have the 5, 6, or 7 E's, and these are the ones that we work with in LA. So we have this equity pillar, which we're still working on defining, but we really see this dignity-infused community engagement process as a strong underpinning for our equity goals. We also do evaluation. We take evaluation a step further from just analyzing the pre-existing conditions and then the post-conditions to really evaluating the cultural context and social need at the community level. And I will talk a little bit about what that process looks like. We also are taking a different lens on what it means to do Vision Zero engineering. And so while we're building capacity at the community level, we're also building capacity internally by offering up professional development opportunities to engineers so that they can learn how their designs and their construction timelines impact the lived experiences of people living in South LA. And then lastly, education is something that we've always invested a lot of money into, but when I first got to the department, a lot of the education dollars went to billboards and marketing as opposed to tangible on the ground engagement. So very recently, over the last 8 to 12 months, we've been working really hard through our partnerships to shift the dynamic from just sharing information with the community and promoting our projects to actually having a two-way conversation with stakeholders. So I'll let Ice talk a little bit about how he came to the work and some of the plans that we have moving forward this year.
Thank you for that. Good morning, everyone. Can everyone hear me? I just want to make sure everyone can hear me.
We can hear you.
Okay, cool. So my name is Ice Lyfe. I'm director of Lyfe Productives. We are a social marketing and product development firm based now here in Los Angeles. We have a staff and faculty of 9 folks and are really committed to figuring out ways to make programming, products, and campaigns that are good for people, as provocative and as irresistible as possible. And I'm originally from Oakland, California. Oakland, and I know that there's Oakland-based folks on the call. The Oakland that I grew up in is very different from the Oakland that is the Oakland that's there now. And as our work, and my work personally and the work of our firm has been about addressing not only addressing the outcomes of gentrification or planning that doesn't consider marginalized communities. We also have an approach that's preemptive and solution-based. And one of our key approaches over the years has always been to figure out ways to combat marginalization and institutional discrimination by incorporating communities in the work from the very onset. We are not a nonprofit organization or a community-based organization. We are a product development firm with sensibilities and investments in those that either are the same as those type of organizations or partner with often organizations doing that work. And so, for example, one thing that really stood out to me years ago was we were constantly being approached by health providers and industries around engaging community. And whenever folks talk about engaging communities or engaging community-based organizations, there's always this kind of subtext of condescension, and we have always been uncomfortable with that. And then also there's been, frankly, often very laughable approaches to engage communities if the measure is to really permanently reverse the issues. Some of the things that are come up with to combat the economic and health disparities in the communities were laughable and nonsensical. And so what we started doing early on is, so for example, we were approached one year by in Oakland by the Port of Oakland around youth programming, and they were wanting to give a lot of resources away to young people between the ages of 18 and 25. And we developed a program that instead of a donation or a kind of youth summer program, that instead they valued the amount of money that they were considering donating and instead funded into jobs. So if there was $250,000 in donated resources, instead of that, $250,000 of job opportunities for folks at the port. Later on with Kaiser Permanente, Kaiser was really interested in combating health disparities in Richmond by having after-school hip-hop and fashion classes in Richmond, which of course we saw to not serve a measurable outcome. So instead we collaborated with Kaiser to design a program that would bring people into the healthcare industry and into jobs, and also collaborate with doctors to present to marginalized youth in the Richmond and Oakland areas. So we've always tried to evolve and build out programming that is par with any other just standard program that would exist to empower and prepare communities for the future that's coming. And we notice a kind of different nuance whenever people are engaging some of the most marginalized communities. So we were really excited when we first came on board with the transportation project in Los Angeles, because it was really apparent to me out the gate that that Vision Zero in Los Angeles is an environmental justice project as much as it's a transportation project. And the key pillars of the program and what we were being asked to collaborate with here in Los Angeles was something that connected to the already powerful energy and conversation and active dialogue that was happening around transportation safety and disparity awareness in a way that we were just kind of connecting those two worlds together. And so we've built out programming that considers the needs of folks, but also empowers and hires and integrates community-based organizations as key deployers of the work. Dr. Thomas is showing this slide here where we did a activation. It was a children's fair last summer. And young people are asked just to write down where they feel safety or why safety is important to them. And you can see, I mean, this really epitomizes some of the challenges in South LA. The child wrote, "My safety is important to me because I feel safe when I'm inside." that without being prompted to, without being given, any kind of coercing language to answer this question, we see children writing that they feel safest when they're in the house. And a large part of that safety or concern being about the way that traffic and cars are moving through the neighborhood. So when we collaborate with CBOs, one thing that's really important is that we do as best we can to bring CBOs to the table as peer partners. I want to speak pretty frankly to something that when my firm, we work with large corporations, we work with city governments, we work in commercial and commerce sectors. And whenever folks talk about community-based organizations, it always sounds like they're either talking about a troubled youth, or it's par with the way that people would talk about like a dog shelter program or something. And as brash or as harsh as a statement as that may be, that's what it feels like to us when we're in conversations with developers or city organizations, is there's always this infantizing and condescension upon community-based organizations, which are made up of adults and professionals and powerful older, younger people that are doing excellent work. And so when we meet with CBOs and start to build our collaboration with CBOs, we talk about the CBO Power being seated in these three spots. One, that community-based organizations lead the way by informing the Vision Zero engagement process. So at the inception, as we're building out our deployment and engagement, it is informed by community-based organizations. And we encourage CBOs to feel ownership over the new transportation infrastructure and planning efforts in their community. So rather than being, I lift up all the time that often when we're in meetings with community-based organizations, before like asserting an opinion or asking a question, we're noticing that people would apologize. So for example, they'll go, I'm sorry, I just wanted to say. And it's something as simple as that. They're apologizing for their presence and ownership over the tone. And we really work to make sure that all folks on both sides of the table feel empowered to see and understand CBOs as having ownership over that infrastructure. And another key part of our programming is that all modes are considered in our work. That when we do our deployment work, that we're considering all different abilities and modes in the work, and we have a commitment to access around language justice. I'm really impressed by and really proud of how language translation and ability considerations goes into every aspect of our work, along with childcare at our events, transportation accommodations. We have an entire line item in our budget for restorative justice to deal with conflicts as they arise across the project. And we have a preemptive, proactive anti-displacement model and resource infused in our work. And these things do not just exist at our large scale events, but even our smaller meetings and smaller convenings have all of those elements considered. In closing out, I want to talk a little about our social climate analysis. That we have something called a system of maintaining excellence at my firm that we use for any project that we're embarking on, and certainly we wanted to make sure it was infused in our work here. And so whether it be a large-scale activation around safety that we're building out, a new campaign, a small event that a community-based organization is doing, or a very large-scale, very involved one like the one that we're rolling out on Avalon Boulevard in the coming month, we begin with a climate analysis. We found that normally organizations or city governments kind of lead with a bottom line and what their goals and what their goals are for a project. So, for example, in the transportation realm, the bottom line is we need to install advanced evolved type of signaling process at this intersection. We come in first with a climate analysis that first assesses what's going on in the area on a geographical and socio-political level, as well as what the engineering needs are there on the street. That's the first part of our analysis. And if we can go up a slide to hopped around a little. Yeah, there. Yes, thank you. That from there, we go into a needs assessment that considers both the tangible and structural needs to meet one of our goals out in the field. And then we have a solid regulation, creed, and standard model that governs the laws and principles that we use in moving forward on any project. And this has been a great anchor from all of our work as we bring literally hundreds of people together around the work.
So I'm going to close this out. I know we're coming up on our time, and I'll share these resources after the webinar, but it's important for us that we lift up that one of our core themes this year is to develop ways to predict, prevent, and assess how our specific project elements contribute to displacement. And so we just wrapped up a preliminary study to begin to develop a tool that would help us measure likelihood of impact that's very similar to the GHG calculator that maybe many of us are familiar with that accompanies most state-funded projects. And so we realized there wasn't an industry-wide standard or tool for measuring or holding us accountable for how our projects impact communities from a displacement and gentrification standpoint. And so within the coming months, we'll share some of our preliminary results and talk through our next steps from a policy standpoint. And we just want to leave you with a few key reminders that you should always be working to shift the narrative, to recenter people who are missing from the conversation. Never stop engaging. So we're not just going and talking to the community when we have a project to talk about. We're incorporating them in every aspect of our work. And we didn't talk about this much today, but we always take an interdisciplinary approach. So we have teams that include social workers, mental health specialists, housing advocates, you name it, because our underlying goal is to meet the greater need of the communities that our projects are in.
Thank you, Dr. Thomas and Ice, very much. All right, while we prepare the screen for OakDOT, I just want to share a quick reminder with everybody to go ahead and send your questions via the chat feature. We'll start collecting those to prepare for the discussion after the OakDOT presentation. And it looks like we are ready to go. Ahmed, take it away.
All right, thank you so much. So my name is Ahmed Ali Bob. I'm the Community Engagement and Communications Coordinator here at the Oakland Department of Transportation, better known as OakDOT. I'm joined by my colleague, Lily Brown, and our strong community partner, Phoenix Mangrum. And it's really a pleasure for us to get to show you around the city that we all care about so much and give you a sense on what the Department of Transportation has been working on in partnership with our community. So without further ado, let's get into it. This is on your screen, a picture of Lake Merritt, what we consider to be the crown jewel of our city. And it's really centrally located where, you know, it's a major landmark. And according to the pedestrian plan of 2017, this is, you know, the part of Oakland that Oaklanders feel most connected to outside of their own neighborhood. So we've given quite a bit of consideration on how we can make this a resource that serves the needs of all of the various types of users. And by way of background, the City of Oakland has a population of about 420,000. We've got wonderful climate all throughout the year, and we've got one of the most ethnically diverse mid-sized cities in the country. And you know, there's hundreds of languages that are spoken here, and also some very real disparities by race, by income, depending on what part of the city we're looking at here. So given those challenges, community engagement and equitable community engagement is a very key priority for our department. We're a new organization. We've only been up on our feet for about 2 years now, and we were really founded around 4 core values. which you can see on the screen. So our first value is equity, followed by safety, sustainability, and responsive and trustworthy government. And those 4 values really inform all of our programs. But recently, we've been partnering with the City of Oakland's Department of Race and Equity very closely. And Oakland, as a city, is very fortunate to have the first Department of Race and Equity in the state of California. And it's more internal facing with a limited staff, but the focus is on changing practices and policies internally with the hope that, that will lead to more equitable outcomes across city agencies for our residents. And with the reorienting of equity as our chief value, we've really seen a shift in equitable community engagement that moves away from the status quo in city planning circles, which is, you can see on the diagram to the left. We call it the DEAD model. So there's D for decide on a course of action, E, educate to our way of thinking, A, announce the decision, and then D, defend the decision from the ensuing protest, because that's the outcome that we've observed when decision-making does not include community voices. So as an aspiration, our department wants to make it to a more inclusive model of decision-making, which you can see illustrated on the right side of the screen with the live engagement model, where we look into issues and the history and challenges and constraints of communities. And we investigate on our time who needs to be involved and value all input to ensure mutual learning and capacity building while engaging in collaborative problem solving and decision making. And as I said, this is aspirational, so this is where we want to get to. And we haven't gotten everything figured out. We're just 2 years old, but we're very proud of the progress that we've made in a limited span of time to shift our approach to partnering with communities to a more inclusive model of decision making. And one of the ways that you can see this shift is in the Repave Oakland campaign that we've recently launched, where some of the key takeaways include a shift to a quicker 3-year paving plan compared to the previous 5-year plan, so that folks can see some work happen on a quicker pace, and people that are not on the paving list immediately can have some hope that in a limited amount of time we'll be reissuing a paving plan, and hopefully their street is on that list. So the 3-year paving plan for 2019 includes $100 million of paving funds that will be in the ground, which triples the average annual spending rate that we've seen in the last 2 years. 75% of this $100 million is going towards local streets that Oaklanders live on, and that really impact the neighborhood quality of life for communities. Some of the other major changes is an equity-driven capital planning process. We've been recently very proud to put out what is the first equity-driven paving plan in the nation. And this is something that we're also very excited about, the opportunity to incorporate safety and make it more routine, so that whenever we are paving in communities, we can shift some of the assets that are in the community, like crosswalks, into a safer, higher visibility model that's the new normal for our department. Here you can see a list of some of the community meetings that we've rolled out in order to get in touch with communities across the city, with a particular emphasis on underserved areas such as East Oakland and parts of West Oakland. And with that said, I'll pass it off to my colleague Lily to give you some background on the Paint the Town program.
Yeah, so another program very different than paving is a pilot program. Can you control everything? Pilot program called Paint the Town, and this is allowing people to paint temporary street murals mid-block or at the intersection of neighborhood streets. And the purpose was to have people take ownership and do placekeeping in their neighborhood, and having streets not just be gray asphalt that people speed through, but giving people a canvas to showcase their pride and ownership of their neighborhood. to make the streets more playful and fun. So the program had 3 goals: for it to be easy, for it to be equitable, and for it to be fun. So to make it easy to apply, we held application clinics at libraries across Oakland, focusing on East Oakland and West Oakland, where people could come and we would walk them through the application, help them fill it out, answer any questions. And we also accepted applications in any format, so people could hand in paper copies to us or submit online. And then we also tried to make it equitable, and that was through doing more of the outreach in more underserved communities, and then setting the goal of having a ratio for every mural that was accepted in a more resourced and served neighborhood. We would accept 2 in more underserved neighborhoods in Oakland. And we actually met that goal having a 9-to-1 ratio. So I think that has to do with the way that we had low barriers to entry and focused our outreach on this program in more underserved neighborhoods. And then the third goal, making it fun. So proposals weren't scored on whether they had really good professional design, but rather what the different community groups or neighborhood or just neighbors getting together, what their project goals were, what their engagement plan was, what they wanted this mural to represent for them. So people could just write down words. They didn't even have to have a professional design. So these are some examples of murals that have been painted so far. This was by Earth Team, which is a after-school program that does like environmental education, and this is in East Oakland. The mural is showing people picking up trash. It's painted over, the street goes over a river. So the next one is an elementary school in the Fruitvale neighborhood that painted a mural with their teachers, their science class. And then next one is just a group of neighbors that painted a mural at a 3-way intersection. And then Northgate Neighbors, this is a group of neighbors that are a neighborhood crime prevention council, and they threw a block party and had bounce castle and had barbecue and had some of the police officers come out and help them paint, and the mayor actually came out to this one. This is another one in West Oakland, across the street from a little plaza, and this was done by Attitudinal Healing Center, which is an organization that does murals all around Oakland, and it's tying to another mural on a wall that then flows out into the street, honoring the different long-term residents of that neighborhood. And then this one was done by an affordable housing developer and some of the residents that live in the California Hotel, which is right next to this location. And there was a lot of issues with safety at this intersection and people getting hit and killed. So we coupled the mural with a quick build safety project. And this mural is honoring the jazz history of West Oakland and a lot of the famous jazz musicians that have played at California Hotel. And this is painted bulb outs that we put. It was a really undefined intersection, a lot of space. There wasn't a crosswalk there before, so there wasn't any safe crossing. So we did bulb outs, and then the community group painted within those bulb outs.
And for those of you that have been to the City of Oakland recently, you know that we have e-scooters. And boy, do we have e-scooters. We have a ton of them operating within our city boundaries. And we really saw the opportunity that e-scooters presented to help us pursue our goals of accessibility and sustainability at the same time. And here's just a couple maps that show what we call the donut hole of access to shared mobility resources, particularly in East Oakland. So what you can see within the red circles is very, stark lack of accessibility to Gig, our car share operator, and Ford Go Bike, our bike share operators. And what we were excited about scooters was that, very quickly we could work with operators to identify areas where there's a dearth of accessibility to shared mobility resources, and work with them to ensure that folks in these underserved, under-resourced areas have access to some form of shared mobility transportation. So where other cities responded to the arrival of scooters by reflexively banning them, such as San Francisco did, Oakland saw an opportunity for us to incorporate a pilot program while we gathered some evidence or data from our communities about what they liked about the e-scooter experience and what some of their concerns were. We did this with a robust, scooter outreach process that included 5 council and commission meetings, 7 community meetings, over 120 participants across the city. And it ultimately culminated in an education campaign intended for scooter users that identified some common sense best practices, such as checking brakes and wheels before riding, wearing a helmet, riding in the bike lane whenever possible, parking with care on the sidewalk near the curbside so as not to block the pedestrian path, and also not riding on sidewalks. Don't park in ramps or rampways or block entrances to buildings. Common sense practices that we felt like we could do our part to help educate what we were sure is many new e-scooter riders in our city. And we also took note of some of the suggestions that we received from community members, one of which was to build better bike lanes. So on the right, you can see a project that we were very proud of by Lake Merritt, which is the Lakeside Green Street 2-way cycle track. And what that means is that both directions of bike lanes are on the same road. We did a road diet that made it so that we have more space for bicyclists and e-scooter riders and pedestrians to share access to this lakeside area here. And then we heard that folks want even more bicycle infrastructure in the form of bike lanes that can connect them to various locations across the city. And, we learned a lot more throughout the course of our bike plan outreach, and I'll let Lily speak a little bit more on that.
All right, so Let's Bike Oakland is our bike plan update that we started in the fall of 2017, and we've just released the draft plan. And with this, we knew that we had to have a really different approach from past bike plans. And so before we did anything, we did a representative survey to learn about Oaklanders' experience biking. So we got a statistically significant survey. We surveyed all across Oakland and broke it down into 8 neighborhood zones, and learned about people's experience biking, current barriers, concerns, challenges, and that kind of set the foundation of how we would approach this. And then we also did a race and equity framework before we started to help us guide the plan analysis, the plan recommendations, and the engagement. So who we were going to partner with, where we were going to focus, what type of approach that we had to take. And then we also partnered with community-based organizations. So we had 5 different community-based organizations that were paid partners in the plan, along with a consulting firm, which is the normal way that we do things. And so we paid partnership with the 5 different community-based organizations, and they helped host community workshops and guide the plan's recommendations, and helped us engage with populations and areas of Oakland that we historically hadn't invested in, and those groups are focused in East and West Oakland. And then we also had new outreach strategies where we used a lot of digital engagement tools. So we put out a map online, and we allowed people to draw what their route is, draw challenges they have, draw where they want to ride, where they want improvements, where they want bike parking. So gathered a lot of input about what people's needs were from that. And then when we had the draft network, we put that back out online, and people were able to comment on the network we had and vote on things and say where we needed other improvements or where those improvements didn't make sense. And then again, when we had the draft plan, we published that online and let people comment on the plan and see other people's comments and vote on comments. So beyond doing a lot of outreach physically in the community, we had a lot of tools online for people to use. And then also did mobile workshops. So not just, we had a bunch of community meetings hosted by our community partners, and then also did a ton of mobile workshops in person where we just went to grocery stores, libraries, transit centers, events already happening in Oakland, and meeting people where they're at, and also getting to engage different, not people people that don't just bike, people that use other modes of transportation are going to be impacted by bike infrastructure. And so our outreach process was broken down into 3 parts. In the beginning, we listened, and then we collaborated, and then we refined. So the listening phase, we had each of the community partners hosted a community meeting, and we just had a bunch of the information about what different bike facilities are, what the current network is, a lot of the statistics that we learned from the survey, and went out before we had any recommendations or any approach to hear what people's experiences were, what we were missing, how people wanted us to go about approaching this planning process. So we learned a bunch about people's experience biking, and then moved into the second phase, where again we had our community partners host workshops. One of them was a design lab hosted by East Oakland Collective that was all day, and we had different sessions that people could go to where we looked at the network and came up with network designs together. We had some programs that we said, these are the things that people were talking about. This is what we heard. This is the preliminary program recommendations. Does this make sense? Does this resonate? What are we missing? And so had people kind of a foundation based on what we heard about program and network recommendations, and then worked with everyone to come up with, reiterate that to get more to the final design. And then the third phase was refining. So some things that we did was go on bike rides with the Scraper Bike team and with Outdoor Afro, 2 of our partners, and we kind of ground truth the network that we had. So we biked where we had the draft network in East Oakland and looked at the pavement condition, looked at some of the challenges at intersections and crossing, looked at, is this really getting you from where you want to go, from this library to this park to this school? And so ground truthing the network that the draft network. And what we learned from this process in the beginning where we did the survey and just listened to people was that a lot more people are biking in Oakland than we previously thought. The census says 3% bike to work, but we found that 20% bike to work and school and other places. So people are riding bikes, not just for work. And there's a lot more people riding than we thought. And we also learned, there's this kind of new Oakland branding where all we see is like a white man in spandex biking, and that there's actually a lot of other people biking, and there's already a strong bike culture in Oakland that's kind of overlooked. So we were trying to uplift the other communities that are biking in Oakland, and actually found from our surveying that across all categories of race and ethnicity, the majority of Oaklanders see people like them biking. It might not be reflected in what our plans look like, but actually on the street, people see people like them biking, and that people believe their neighborhoods would be better places if people rode bikes. And just a breakdown of by the numbers, all the engagement we did, we had, I think it's up to 58 meetings now, or events. So that's community meetings or these pop-ups, mobile workshops, and engaged over 3,000 Oaklanders in person, and then got over 2,000 comments on our web map. So we engaged a lot more people than we usually do and focused that engagement in neighborhoods that historically had been not invested in and didn't have as much bike infrastructure or as much visibility about the existing bike culture. I'm going to hand it over to Phoenix, who is one of the community partners on the bike plan, to talk more about his experience.
Hello, everybody. And as Lily was saying, in the fall of 2017, the OakDOT started to start the process of updating its master bike plan, and we were highly skeptical at that time about our involvement. We were looking at it as, gee, they're going to use us a little bit and not really listen to what we had to say. It was all about gentrification and displacement of people in the neighborhood to do all this nice work, and then people in the community wouldn't have access to it. But as we got into the plan, as Lily outlined, everything that Lily said was true. That's what they actually did, and that's how they won us over by engaging all of us in a meaningful way. And some of what I think has made a big difference is that the OakDOT staff is a youthful staff. It's not made up of people 55 or 60 ready for retirement. and who have a difficult time relating to people in the community. So these are really useful people, and they live in the community. They don't live outside of Oakland for most of them, and so that's made a real big difference in how we trust each other now. We're neighbors. We are people who live together, and so I think that I'm not sure about what other communities are doing, but that's made a really big difference in Oakland. And so and oh, okay, yeah, yeah. I was gonna get that. Okay, yeah. So as we went along in the process, um, the plan was really heavy in infrastructure, and cycle change. We are educators, and we teach people how to safely ride bikes on the street. And up to this point, there's been not a lot of emphasis on a value put into education. And so as we went along, we started beginning to see, well, gee, there's a possible marriage here between the infrastructure and the people who have to use it. And since we are educators, we teach we teach elementary school kids, middle school kids, high school kids, and adults 18 to however old we get, and how to safely ride bikes on the street. And so we begin to see that marriage between infrastructure and the cyclists come together. And so, okay, that means that my time's up.
All right, so that's just a little bit of what's going on in Oakland. As I said, we're a young agency. We're just coming into our third year of operation. But yeah, we've moved really quickly. We're looking to take some of the lessons that we've learned in this first phase of our department and continue our growth trajectory so that we can get to a more inclusive decision-making process with our community. Yeah, thanks for listening.
Thank you, and thank you so much to all of our presenters. We're going to take some time now for some questions. We've been capturing your questions as you've typed them in the chat. If you have any other questions you want to add, please go ahead and type those in the chat box if you haven't already. We will hopefully also be able to get the speakers to address the questions we're not able to get to before the end of our time here, which is noon. So it looks like we've got a few questions to start with. And this one I think is more for a resource. Hopefully we can follow up with folks when we send out the webinar, but a question for LADOT. A request from participants for more information on how to access the community climate analysis that ICE mentioned. So is that a link we can send out later with the presentation?
Yes, it is. So we just created a hub on our website. We're in the process of transitioning to a new website, but in the interim, I have created a landing page on the visionzero.lacity.org website that makes all of our tools, overviews, and descriptions of the work available to the public as they're generated. We don't have a final report from the social climate analysis because we're just about to start phase 2 of it. But we definitely have descriptions of the process and tools available on the landing page.
Great, thank you. A question for any of the speakers from a walking and cycling advocacy group in an Alameda County city of less than 20,000. How can we make contact with underserved and underrepresented populations that don't normally engage with us or that we don't normally engage with? Our membership is largely middle class and white, and barriers include language and late working hours.
So I can jump in here. This is Ahmed, and I think that it's going to need to be a combination of different approaches. Too often, in our industry, we rely on digital tools to get the word out, but we know that favors certain more. It's an easy way to get in touch with folks that are pretty easy to get a hold of already. Whether you're using Nextdoor or whether you Twitter I think it favors folks that historically have access to, online tools. But what we like to approach community engagement with in Oakland is a combination of high tech and low tech. You can't beat a well-placed poster or communication graphic on a telephone pole that's running 24 hours a day and can meet people at eye level. I think that's another option in terms of trying to just get the word out about a community meeting or getting a survey to get a little bit more attention and eyeballs. And it has to be a combination of different approaches, whether it's high tech or low tech.
This is Lyfe from Lyfe Productives commenting on the question as well. I think, and my comment is more philosophical, I think that I agree with that. I also think that it begins with caring about, like really considering and caring about communities. I think that when we watch city campaigns or programs or even like commercial efforts find quote unquote hard to reach audiences and engage them, it's because they have a deep passion and care for getting a hold of those folks. And I think sometimes when we say things like we didn't know that this large population existed, I think sometimes it means that we didn't care about or we didn't think about. And so I think along with those very tangible examples that were given, leading pedagogically with an approach that just cares for the existence of those people in the area.
Thank you.
I'm
Any
sorry.
other comments on that question before we move on?
Well, I just like to support what the speaker was saying. You have to meet people where they are and find out where they are, and get people, those hard to reach people. They go to churches, they shop at different places. The kids go to school someplace. They're not that hard to find if you want to find them, and it's just a matter of not just driving through their communities and not paying attention. And so so that's how I find folks. Is I go where they are, and recreation centers. I mean, folks they exist.
Great, thank you. And I think this one is related, and it may be the last question we're able to take during the webinar, but again, we have been recording your other questions offline. For those government agencies that are paying community-based organizations or CBOs, are you hiring directly? If so, are you doing it through an RFP? What is the process that you are not only engaging them, but able to hire and pay them for their work?
Yeah,
This is
Destiny Brown. Oh, go Destiny.
Go ahead. All right, this is Destiny at LADOT. We've actually done it two ways. We learned from the first version where we identified a project area and then scouted the community-based organizations in that area to take ownership of the engagement process. We found that there were inherent challenges and inequities between CBOs when it came to resources on hand or just overarching values that may not prioritize transportation, but other intersectional values that we don't want to lose sight of in our work. And so this year we've taken a different approach, and we developed a community-based organization capacity building institute. And how it works is, number one, we remove barriers to entry in terms of working with the city by not requiring CBOs to go through a traditional bid process, where a lot of the eligibility requirements mirror those of large construction firms or traditional planning firms. Instead, we do a 2 to 3 day capacity building institute where there's a real transfer of knowledge happening from the department to the community. And then the folks in the room are able to co-define what the values for this year's Vision Zero engagement would be. And then instead of parsing out specific communities and attaching them to CBOs, we've pulled all of the resources, skills, values, and interests of our team of about 25 CBOs and we leverage and move as a collective group in each community, recognizing that certain folks will have expertise in their area. So it's also powerful because leadership is always decentralized and fluid. So if we do work in South LA, we'll probably look to a group like Slate Z as a lead agency, but they would also be supportive in conceptualizing and strategizing for work happening in West LA. While in that area, we might identify another CBO as the expert lead. So we decided to pool resources as opposed to creating an expectation that a CBO can manage the full range of legislative engagement and community engagement within a small window of time.
Thank you. Unfortunately, we are at the end of our session together, and so I want to thank all of our presenters, thank all of the folks who joined us today. Thank you to the OakDOT team and the LADOT team for your time on this and for sharing your knowledge and experiences. I encourage everyone to take what you've learned today and apply it to your work. And as a reminder, we will have these slides as well as a link to the recording of the webinar available for you soon, along with the contact information for our speakers, and hopefully we'll be able to include the questions we weren't able to get to as well. We'll be sending you a short survey for you to provide us feedback on this webinar, and we would love for you to fill that out. And in fact, we'll be hosting another webinar later this summer featuring how communities are using the SafeTREC tool Street Story for community engagement. So look out for that announcement coming your way. Thank you so much for sharing a part of your day, and goodbye.